Hello and welcome to Vintage Super League. I'm Randy Bueller. I'm being joined by Luis Scott Vargas. We are ready to get this thing started. We've got 5 matches on queue for you today. I know that Twitch has had some problems. We're going to fight through those. Maybe you're watching this on the archive later. That works too. Going to be a fun tournament. Yeah, Luis?
Yeah, I'm sort of looking forward to it. We've got a lot of gamesmanship because you only play 3 people. So in every any given set with like your deck. So you really have to. I mean, we all know each other to some degree. Some better than others. You really have to look at like, are these 3 people capable of playing Stacks, Dredge, Storm, Oath, whatever it is?
Yeah, so the way the rules work, you can change decks every 3 weeks. So none of us know what anybody else is playing. I mean, some people have talked around the edges because they weren't playing each other in this set. But, I know I, for one, was looking at, okay, who are my first 3 opponents? In my case, it was Rich Shea, it was Luis, and it's Bob Maher. So I'm like, okay, that's kind of the metagame I have to build a deck for. And 3 weeks from now, I can just change my deck. And then you had the same situation, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm playing Bob Maher round 1, and then I'm playing you, and then I'm playing Tom Martell. So I just kind of like figure out what your guys' ranges are.
Very interesting process. So that means that none of the players know the decks right now. There are no deck lists available. There will be deck lists posted after week 1. We'll go ahead and post the deck lists publicly. So when we play our week 2 matches and our week 3 matches, we're going to know exactly what's in the other guy's deck. But this week, nobody knows, and there's definitely been a lot of jockeying for position.
Yeah, all we have is kind of like the historical trends of what people play, whereas after the first set, we now know we have concrete evidence of what someone just chose to play in the Vintage League, and then that's just going to continue as it goes on.
There you go. Let's take a look at the schedule for week 1. Like I said, this is the first week. We've got the schedule set up. The first match is going to be the match between Tom Martell and Chris Pikula. Those guys are getting into a match on Magic Online now-ish. Yeah, I can actually see in Mitgo. Tom is setting the game up. We'll get you guys there momentarily. After those guys play, you're up. And it's first Hall of Fame versus Hall of Fame match we're going to have. This is, I think, the one a lot of people have been looking forward to. Luis is going to be playing against Bob Maher. So you'll obviously step out of the commentary booth and go down and play at that point.
Well, step is not quite literal. I'm actually not going to move. I'm going to stay sitting where I am. But yes.
It does work out kind of well there. Josh is going to come in there. Josh Eder-Layton will come in to do commentary there. And then that's another nice thing we're doing. We're just going to be using the competitors as commentators throughout the whole way. So for Dave Williams and Steve Menendian, that's an interesting one, by the way. Dave Williams right now is playing in the World Poker Tour LA Classic or World Poker Tour Legends. I forget the name. He's in a poker tournament, $10,000 buy-in poker tournament. It's just day 1, though. So apparently he's happy to just take a break, not lose any chips for long enough to play his match out. So we'll get him in, and then the other 2 matches down the stretch. Going to be a fun day for sure. I don't know if I would sit out, 30, 45 minutes of a poker tournament to play. What about you?
I mean, I don't play poker, but given what it entails, even if you let's say it was like a Magic tournament, you could take a break. I don't know if I would want to lose the focus, but I mean, Dave is a veteran at this point. I'm sure he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, no, he definitely. I texted him earlier today, and he seemed happy that we would keep him from blowing his chip lead at that point. He's apparently doing pretty well. I saw he doubled up about an hour ago.
Awesome.
Pocket pair and a gut shot held versus a flush draw. So. Or top pair and a gut shot held up versus the flush draw.
I'm like watching the game right now.
Tom and Chris are about ready to go. Yeah. All right. Yeah, those guys can start. We are going to watch. Looks like Tom hasn't decided whether to play first or not, so we're not going to have hands for you. We're observing the games on Magic Online. We do have some ideas about how we can potentially include the players' hands in future weeks of the broadcast. I know that you guys would like to see what these guys are holding and how that's working, so we're working on it. Hopefully we'll have that sorted out for next week, but we do not have it for this week. It's also kind of interesting, I think, we don't have the deck list at this point. So, I mean, Luis and I are kind of going off our familiarity with the vintage format. And it's always kind of fun for me, actually, I think, trying to figure out what people are up to based on the couple of cards that they've played. I think maybe you had a conversation with Tom and I had a conversation with Chris. So we have some information.
I know what Tom is playing. and you know what Chris is playing presumably.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I've heard there are Mystic Remoras in Tom's deck. Let's just put it that way.
That does sound like Tom. Chris took a mulligan. It's taking about a second, and they're off. Chris kept 6. Oh, this looks like the same deck Tom played against me on the stream last week, actually. His preseason scrimmage match versus me was Fastbond Gush. I mean, it seemed like a deck he had a lot of experience with and was pretty happy with.
Opening with Fastbond in a Fastbond deck is pretty awesome. Like, the only reason the deck isn't the best is that you only just play one Fastbond. And even though Gush is good without Fastbond, the combination is absurd, right? Pay 2 life, add 2 mana, draw 2 cards.
100% agree. If you could draw Fastbond every time, this would be the best deck in the format.
Of course, drawing 4 lands in a Fastbond means the last 2 cards, which aren't Gushes, because otherwise Tom would have just cast one. I mean, they could be like Mana Drain, Flusterstorm, or something like that.
Sure. Chris with the Mishra's Factory.
Does that mean that we might be seeing a Stacks deck here? That's the only deck I really know that plays Mishra's Factory. Obviously, you'd rather draw Mishra's Workshop, but...
yeah, no, it's the wrong Mishra land for sure. But yeah, he told me he was going to run Shops.
Well, Chris also thought for a decent amount of time on his 6-card hand, so it looks he might have kept a Mana Light, good spell hand with Stacks there instead of going to 5.
Yeah, good point. That Vampiric got the Ancestral, presumably.
Yeah, even if Tom's hand isn't insane here, Chris has to be a kind of big dog. If your opponent has 5 mana out and you have no lock pieces, I mean, that just makes a lot of the cards in Chris's deck just not good.
Yeah, I mean, just the Fastbond all by itself negates some of his lock pieces, I would think.
Yeah, definitely.
The fact that Tom's able to just get ahead on mana is pretty powerful.
Yeah, I think that, Stacks is trying to make it so your opponent can't cast a single spell, and right now Tom can cast any spell in his deck, so that just means that even if Chris could cast 2 or 3 cards next turn, there are not that many of them do anything. Oh, we're gonna get to see some hands here.
I don't think we get it. Oh, yeah, there you go. Chris has decided his expected value was higher by just conceding the game rather than letting Tom see his hand.
Classic strategic Thoughtseize.
Okay. Yeah, kind of a blowout of a game. Did you see those in Vintage from time to time?
Yeah, I mean, Tom had a very good hand and Chris had a very bad one, so the game was pretty lopsided, but that is the sort of thing that can happen. I mean, at least it's faster here. Like, you can have lopsided games in other formats that just take longer to conclude. At least here we're done.
Fair. We need to make sure we're not observing this match.
Yeah. Another interesting thing is that even though it's, like I said, I mean, I saw Mishra's Factory and thought Stacks immediately. Yep. Tom is still probably only like 80% sure, 90% sure that's the case. If Chris is just unlikely to win at that point, scooping to a Thoughtseize makes a lot of sense.
Oh, yeah. Now, that's a good point. You put Tom on 80% Stacks read. Tom doesn't play a ton of Vintage, does he?
No. Tom is going to put Chris on 80% Stacks off playing Mishra's Factory, no other plays.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. You think it's that high? I mean, you had him on Stacks from just a Factory. It's a great point.
I mean, there's just not very many other decks that play Factory. So even though it's not 100% because Chris didn't play anything else, you can't be completely sure. Right. I would still board as if Chris was Stacks here. I think that, especially since Tom's deck is generally not great against Stacks, it's got so many dead cards, like Remora is like real bad, and like a lot of the counter spells are very bad, like Flusterstorm or Mental Misstep. I think that boarding as if he were Stacks is probably worth it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can't think of another deck that would play a Mishra's Factory there. I mean, obviously, whatever deck it is, you got a terrible draw. Yeah, no, you had that read. I think you're right. I think Tom will have the same read that you did. Yeah. All right, I think they're into game 2 now.
And we'll probably see more spells this game, though maybe not from Tom. If Chris is a good draw, Tom could just cast 0 spells. I've lost plenty of games against Stacks without casting a single spell.
Yeah, Chris kept his 7 on the play, so I'm going to guess there's a Mishra's Workshop involved. Looks like Tom
at the very least, the ability to provide, make 2 mana on turn 1. That's like the bare minimum to cast a Sphere or a Chalice or something.
And it's a Workshop. Oof. Null Rod.
Null Rod is actually not as effective against the Fastbond decks as other things.
Okay. And it looks like that's all his draw does, is Workshop Null Rod.
I mean, it's going to be good here. Tom's discarding and has no plays, but...
What? Tom kept a hand with a bunch of... Wow, he still has Remora in his deck, too.
But not
so I guess Tom probably kept a hand with a bunch of Moxes.
But even then, playing a Mox is better than discarding a Remora, so what does Tom have?
Black Lotus? Yeah, why wouldn't you just play them?
Well, at this point, we're just not going to see any play. Potentially no spells from Tom as well.
Crazy. Yeah, Chris with the land for the Lodestone Golem. That's the guy that really put this deck over the top. I feel like before Lodestone Golem was printed, Stax decks were these kind of annoying, super long lock decks. And now all of a sudden, they can just beat down with a 5-power guy. Wow. I wonder if
there we have it.
Both players cast spells.
So we're aiming to wrap up the league matches tonight by 8:19 or so? Yeah,
this... I was kind of wondering how long the show was going to go. Figuring with 5 matches, I was guessing we'd be in the 2.5 hour range, but at this pace, we're going to be done pretty quick.
Yeah.
Gotta think we're on the short side of games, though. Those games are probably faster than turn 1 kill games would go. Wow, so Tom still had Mystic Remora in his deck, which is just miserable against Stax, right?
He, looking at the chat we have going, looks like Manedian guessed land still off seeing a Mishra's Factory, and Chris's gambit of discard or conceding might have led Tom to think it was land still, in which case Remora is actually quite good.
Wow, no, you're right. That totally makes sense. Yeah, you had me where I'd had a conversation with Chris. I was able to confirm your read, but land still is a thing. There are definitely people who will play standstills and 50, 60, or 40 lands in their deck.
Yeah, land still's it's generally good against the decks I favor, just because it punishes blue decks, but I don't know how good it is in the format as a whole.
Right. No, I occasionally lose to them as well, and I always wonder why that deck is here. It doesn't seem any good.
All right, so we're gonna see Tom sideboarding a lot more to this game than he probably did last game, since Chris had full information, or basically full information. I guess you don't know everything that goes on, but all the Gush decks play kind of similarly, whereas Tom now actually knows exactly what Chris is up to.
Yeah, no, Tom's take on the Gush deck, if it's the same deck that he played against me last week, he runs it creatureless, which is not the norm. A lot of people will play Young Pyromancer in that deck. Some people will even take it in a Delver direction and be particularly aggressive with their creatures. Tom was completely creatureless, and he had a Storm finish. He was killing with Tendrils.
Well, if you play Delver, though, you generally don't play Fast One. They're not going that big. They try to play all 1 and 2 drops, and Gush is just the hard way.
Fair.
But the Fast Bond versions want actual extra mana, so yeah, they run the Fast Bonds. But yeah, there's a range of them, but from stacks, how different are you going to board against all these different decks?
Right. Yeah, I think we're ready for game 3. See if both players get to cast spells this time.
All right. So, talking to Martell, when Chris conceded game 1, Martell had 4 lands in his hand. He had no spells.
That's funny. That's a pretty good Thoughtseize then.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Yeah, these are our best 2 out of 3 matches. The format for the overall event is it's a 10-player round robin. So every week you play somebody. 9 weeks later, we'll have some regular season standings. We'll cut to the top 4 and start up a playoff. It's Tom took 1 mulligan but kept his 6-card hand.
Is this a fast bond or a blue spell? Less impressive than a fast bond. Mulliganing actually against stacks really doesn't matter that much, I've found, because when in their good draws, if you don't have a good draw against them, you don't get to cast anything. It's your whole hand's a mulligan. You'd rather mulligan to 5 and be able to cast 2 or 3 spells, because it does not take very many spells to actually beat them, because none of their cards do anything once you're actually casting spells.
A fine point.
That being said, mulliganing is still not very fun, but it's much worse against a blue deck, I think.
All right, let's see what Chris has got.
Yeah, this is big for Chris. Tom just has a reasonable start, and
Mutavault really is not the land he wants to play turn 1. I guess if he has enough boxes.
Mutavault and Mishra's Factories? That's something.
Yeah, this list has been running around. It's kind of an interesting take on the stacks list. I haven't. Wow, Revoker.
It's going to revoke that Ruby, is my guess.
That's what I would guess too.
I didn't know Mutavault was a playable vintage card, but there's probably other people playing Mutavaults in this tournament, if I had to guess.
We'll see. Yeah, he does name Mox Ruby.
Yeah, we can zoom in on the client even.
Yeah. Well, they won't see when you zoom. They see when our tech guy zooms.
Uh-huh.
Is that a good enough keep there if you're Chris? Turn 1 Revoker?
I don't think so, but I mean, he kept it. Like, it's not. I mean, I don't know the rest of his hand, but given no workshop, he could have like Wasteland and Strip Mine, which makes this a little better. But still,
Sure.
Turn 1 Revoker is just so anemic. It's not even one of your good lock pieces. I don't know.
I mean, it's almost as good as a Wasteland, right? It might even be better than a Wasteland.
Right, but like casting a Wasteland on turn 1 is just not good. So, especially since you can only Wasteland Moxes, not actual lands. So you're Wastelanding when they have 2 lands. So. I don't know. I think that Tom's actually in pretty good shape. I mean, if Chris doesn't have a Wasteland and Tom gets to land a Mana Drain here, then assuming Tom's playing that Mana Drain, I don't actually know his entire list. I mean, that's insane. If you ever resolve Drain against stacks, you're in such good shape.
Yeah.
But I haven't played this particular build of stacks, and I haven't played with stacks in a couple years. So, if he's activated Mutavault turn 2, I'm going to go ahead and back up my point that this is not the best hand you've ever seen.
Crazy. No, I haven't seen this particular stacks list in action as well. Like I said, I chatted with Chris just a little bit this afternoon, and he was talking about it. He's played a lot of Vintage over the years, and he's played a fair amount of Vintage recently with a lot of different decks. I mean, he definitely was the kind of guy who's like, well, I've played all of these decks, so what do I think is going to be good against my suite of opponents this week? Well, the next 3 weeks. This was one of the ones that he thought was good. Yeah, attacking for 4 and not disrupting. Tom is on a mulligan. He's only got the 4 cards.
Chris does have the Wasteland, so this actually was a productive turn. Slow the Wasteland is makes this hand look a lot better, but Tom could gush here. Not that that's actually that insane, because it sets him back just to having 1 land and play next turn.
It'll make Chris feel bad. I mean, if he has the gush, he should totally cast it here and save his land, right? Like, you're picking up 1 land to draw 2 cards at that point?
Yeah, if Tom doesn't have another land in hand, he's kind of priced into it.
Yeah, I think he's definitely priced into it. Floating a green mana and a blue.
In case he draws like a Nature's Claim or something.
Yeah, I guess that's... Like, you're picking up 1 land to draw 2 cards at that
Gush.
point? Such a savage way to be a Wasteland.
If Tom doesn't have another land in hand, it is pretty funny. He's kind of priced into it.
Yeah, and there's the Nature's Claim on Revoker. So he turns his Ruby back on.
Yeah, Nature's Claim's good there.
All right, so game 3. These players split a pair of fairly lopsided games. Tom, I
most
think...
lopsided I've ever seen in my entire life. So.
Yeah, no, Chris in the first game conceded to a Thoughtseize where all he had played was Mishra's Factory, so Tom clearly sideboarded badly for game 2, and then wound up mana screwed by a Null Rod anyway, so here we are in the first... This has been a real game so far. I mean, we're 3 turns into it, and neither player has done anything ridiculous.
Yeah, if Chris doesn't have a relevant lock piece to play this turn, he's super far behind. Like, if he plays a Null Rod, that would be great, but it's got to be kind of that one.
Null Rod shuts off his own Mox Pearl, but I think he'd be totally fine with that. Wow, and Tom went with the Island, the basic, so that he's not vulnerable to future Wastelands, after saving his dual land with a Gush.
Or Chris could attack with a bunch of Mishra's Factory with Mutavaults. I guess that's a thing too. If Chris is attacking for 3 with Mutavault this turn, things are not going well for him.
He can attack for 3. Use the factory to pump it up because it's an assembly worker.
I assume that's why that's in the deck. Sculpting Steel on a Soul Ring, I guess, and then maybe play a lock piece. Chris could still play a lock piece this turn.
Sphere? Another Revoker. This is an oddly creature-based Shocks deck Chris has got here.
Yeah, it looks like someone linked us to the deck that presumably he's playing that won some tournament last week.
Okay.
That has it has the 8 man lands, so 4 Mischief Factory, 4 Mutavault, and then 4 Lodestone Golem, 4 Revoker, a Darksteel Juggernaut, 4 Metamorph, and then 4 Sphere, 4 Thorn. So it's a pretty beatdown focused shop deck. But it looks like Mox Ruby was named actually, not Sol Ring.
Huh.
Well, that cuts off like Ingot Chewers or Ancient Grudge or anything like that, so that makes sense. It's not clear how much colorless mana Tom's deck actually needs.
Right. So this won a big tournament last weekend.
I think so. I mean, someone linked something. I didn't read the whole thing, but...
Makes sense. Oh, 1 Waterberry. Terra Nova. Of course, it's Menendian who's on top of the source of the deck.
It's not also unreasonable to assume that Chris might have like a second Wasteland here. So even if Tom has a mana drain, which has kind of looked like he's been trying to keep up, Chris could just Wasteland and stop that from happening. Chris could also just attack for 6. Puts Tom on a pretty fast clock.
It's true. No, the Factory and the Mutavault are going to add up here. What, 2.5 turns? 3-turn clock right now? Vintage decks are surprisingly soft to creatures.
No, there's a Thorn. Thorn's the first real piece of disruption we've seen.
Wasteland sort of counts. I mean, it would count if it hadn't gotten gushed out from under. All right, so the Thorn resolved.
So, I mean, Tom might not even be playing mana drains, because if he had one, you would just slam it here.
I'm pretty sure he was playing them last week. He just must not have one in his hand.
He was representing it, though.
Yeah. I mean, his deck likes to live at instant speed from what I saw of it last week.
Well, not attacking with the Mischief Factory of the Mutavault here, so Chris clearly has a follow-up.
Yeah, he must. It adds a turn to the game, too, right? Yeah, all the deck lists from these games are going to get posted publicly after this week's games. None of them are posted. Now, I think if you do search, go on the internet and search for the deck that won Waterbury last weekend, you can probably find a list which is likely Chris's list. But we'll post Chris's actual list once the matches are done. All right. Nature's Claim dispatches the Revoker. Chris plays a Caracas. He's got 4 mana, though non-creature spells do cost 1 more because of the Thorn.
I'm not a huge fan of Nature's Claim against stacks. I mean, obviously you board it in and it's fine. It's not a super effective card. I mean, the reason you play it is because it does double duty against Oath of Druids, but it's so vulnerable to Chalice for 1, and a 1-for-1 removal spell is not actually good because you need to kill all their lock pieces generally.
Right.
So, like, look at this game. It's killed a couple of Revokers,
I like
but
the most against this deck.
like, imagine if that was like an Ancient Grudge or something.
Fair. Does a Force of Will paying 1 extra for the Thorn? Sure. So what did he exile?
He exiled a Jace, and he could have actually just cast Jace last turn.
Wow. Must be his only blue card then.
Yeah, I would assume so. And then also the Mishra's Factory and the Mutavault do make Jace a lot worse.
Well, that's true. Yeah, Jace would have just died. He would have gotten 1 activation. It would have just died.
Yeah, Mutavault doing a thing. I mean, it mattered there.
Definitely mattered there. Yeah, maybe he just declined to cast the Jace because of the man lands. Men lands? Can't be right. Man lands. And there's the Null Rod shutting off Sol Ring and Mock Ruby.
Tom's in a lot of trouble.
All of a sudden, yeah. And this Terra Nova list is looking pretty good here all of a sudden. This is Chris on the draw, trying to break serve without coming out of the gates particularly disruptively. Tom got off a Gush to spoil a Wasteland. He got off a pair of Nature's Claims, countered a Lodestone Golem, and he still seems like he's in trouble. Yeah,
but the way to beat stacks is to like do something proactive or good. Like when they don't have a lock piece in play, just passing the turn is, means you're not going to win. And so far, Tom hasn't actually played anything that comes close to winning the game. Not that Chris isn't providing good disruption here, but I think a good draw from a normal vintage deck would beat turn 1 Revoker, turn 2 Revoker, Wasteland. So
yeah, Tom does not have the most proactive deck, though. I mean, if his plan is a Storm kill with the Tendrils, he kind of needs to accumulate a handful of stuff. Like, Storm decks are particularly vulnerable to stacks, right? Piece of, just
every card in the stacks deck is a hate card.
Yeah.
Like, the whole deck is just trying to do the exact thing that Storm doesn't want to do.
Yep. Yeah, even one Thorn is enough to beat a lot of Storm kills.
Yeah, Storm generally cannot win with one of the good luck pieces in play. Like mostly one of the Spheres, Thorns, or Lodestone Golems. It can get past like Revoker, or even Null Rod is like annoying but workable.
Right.
Like this deck has Fast Bond, other decks have Dark Rituals, etc.
Yeah, I don't know what Tom does from here, though. He's just going to die to Mishra's Factory and Mutavault. 3 cards in his hand. It's really hard for him to stitch together a kill from here. And what's his proactive plan that's going to beat Mutavault Mishra's Factory? Huh. One more turn.
I don't know if Tom is out here.
What you got, Tom?
He's playing vintage. Clearly, he could do something, but
crazy. Congratulations, Chris Pikula. Chris Pikula gets on the board first, puts up the win over Tom Martell. The Terra Nova Manland-based Shops deck over the Gush Tendrils. Wow, that was cool.
All right, so I guess I'm going to be making a game, and Bob's going to hop into it. Is that the plan here?
Yeah, so what we'll do now is we'll throw to a commercial break real quick. That'll give us time to let you go get a game set up, bring in a new commentator, and we will be right back momentarily with our second match of the Vintage Super League. So stay tuned.
All right, see you guys later.